Hello friends, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about radical friends, infinite dogs, and the end of history, and it's also the end of the Steam Next Fest, and I want to talk about it. So this is kind of like a non-regular development update thing, because, well, the last week sure was a week. Oh my god. So the Steam Next Fest, technically it's still going until like my time, like in the evening at some point, but um, how did it go? Overall, not well. Um, I'm not even like talking about numbers because who cares about them? And I mean, I can talk a little bit more about uh, like what kind of expectations you have like from the Steam Next Fest and all that kind of stuff, and like how there might be also like some clashes between what I wanted to get out of it versus what potential players wanted to get out of it. But let's not dwell on that too much. So there were a bunch of problems at the start of the Next Fest. It took me until like, I don't know, Thursday or even Friday until the demo was not broken in some way, and it had like a lot of like, because of very strange reason. But let's go through it very quickly. First of all, the demo didn't launch when you launched it through Steam, which was a bit unfortunate considering that Virtuous Heaven was actually was part of like Valve's press outreach stuff, because in the backend I was able to see, there were like some weird press key activations for the game, so it had been sent out to streamers and like whoever else, I don't know. The problem was that the demo didn't launch. There's actually a video of it. I found it like one YouTube compilation thing mentioned it in like within the first 20 seconds that they tried to launch the game and it didn't work. I'm pretty sure the problem disappeared within like on Tuesday when I saw it. The reason why this happened was because in the backend of Steam you have to specify the name of the exe. The like Steam has to like pick and launch. Like you have to tell Steam, okay, this is the thing that you have to launch. However, between the EGX demo and the demo for the Steam Next Fest, I changed the name of the project file and did not. And when you do this in GameMaker, GameMaker basically names the exe that it generates after the project file. And since I changed the project file, the name of the exe was different. I uploaded it to Steam, never updated that part. And even though there was like a quote-unquote working demo, I'll talk about that part in a moment, on Steam was not able to launch it. and the problem here also is I cannot test this on my end because technically I own Virtuous Heaven, and when I own the game, I cannot download and launch the demo. Maybe there's a way, but I wasn't aware of one. Aside from creating a whole new Steam account, which I might have to do. Because like my private Steam account is also registered as like a developer account for Virtuous 7 or for all of my games, so that I can, for example, easily stream to like the game Steam pages without having to log out of my like normal Steam account and all that kind of stuff. So it's weird. Anyway, that was a problem that I had no idea was there, and so that's like, again, I have no idea how well things would have gone on that end if the game would have been able to launch, because it's not that the demo itself didn't had different problems after that. So the keyboard controls were broken, and again, it was a problem that I would say to 75%, I was unable to even see on my end for, again, weird technical reasons. And I only really was able to like grab hold of it like by Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. And even then, if people had downloaded the demo before that part, the keyboard controls on their end were still broken, and I had no way to fix this. Which is why, like in the update post I did on the Steam page, I said, if you downloaded it before, please press the restore default controls button, or like completely delete your options save file, because that's the only way to like get rid of this stuff. And the reason for that is just like, as a very quick thing, an old holdover file from like a very old project that I basically kept, like was part of like this this project file, and that like messed a lot of stuff up that I set up in the meantime, and again, very frustrating. But even if like once that all was fixed, the game had like issues like on a larger front in terms of like player communication. The keyboard controls weren't like very, very well thought out. And frankly, like there were like a few things that I underestimated. First of all, I underestimated how many people would actually be going to play the game on a keyboard. That's one part, and this is all like also like part on me of like making assumptions about stuff, and not really anticipating things. But also, I'm one person that was like fairly overworked over the last 6 weeks. The tutorial in general, like, wasn't very good. I made one mistake in assuming that the tutorial was good enough after the EGX demo, and didn't touch it, even though there were already problems there back then, and there was like stuff that I should have been able to address that I didn't. So a lot of people just stopped playing the game within the tutorial, which then led to me kind of admitting defeat and placing an NPC within the tutorial that tells you, hey, if you want to skip this, you can. Because I wanted, like, what I built, like, after the tutorial, I actually wanted the Steam Next Fest to be something where I could figure out, okay, is this stuff that I built afterwards, like, okay, is this like an approach that I can keep doing for the rest of the game, or what do I have to adjust? And because so many people never got to like that part of the game, this just like wasn't really happening in like at the scale that I wanted it to be. So that was like very unfortunate. What I could gather is that once people actually got past the tutorial, and it's not a lot, so you cannot really say, oh, it's a large sample size or whatever, so who knows. But generally the feedback was positive. Like, it was way more positive than from the people who did not get past the tutorial, which is understandable because the people that stopped playing during the tutorial were probably way too frustrated, and therefore obviously there's not a lot of positive things to say. And the last thing that I underestimated is how little patience people seem to have with games that they don't seem to know. But maybe that's also me projecting things. I have no idea. But that's just like an observation that I had, because also like some of the criticism that I saw was like a little bit of like, yeah, well, I'm basically like the way I set up the game isn't that much different from like another game, and there like you don't see complaints about that in like that game, but here. But again, when you're like frustrated about this very specific thing, everything that's like kind of like not as you expect them to be is like that more like prevalent and that more frustrating. So again, this isn't like me going, oh, everyone's opinions are wrong, because they're not. Like, when you feel frustrated, you feel frustrated, and that's, again, you have to take people's emotions at face value. And what you then have to do is like trying to understand what you can do to improve this stuff, because I'm not here to make a game that like I'm okay with people not liking what I'm trying to do. Where I have problems is when like they're not even able to get to a point to actually see and understand what I'm trying to do. And that's an issue. That's something that I need to fix. But overall, in general, I think it was a good idea to do this now, when the game is still very far out and still very early, because I learned a lot. I fixed a lot of stuff that I usually do, or like I did a lot of stuff, I implemented a lot of stuff that I usually do like within the last few months of development, like stuff like rebindable controls and like working keyboard controls and like thinking about all that stuff and setting all the options up that they actually work and are savable. Not talking about the way the menus look and how the user experience is there, but like the functionality is already there and like the game is very far out from being done. So there's a ton of stuff a ton of work I can do now to make these parts work better, but also I was able to find, or like was able to be aware of issues and things that otherwise I might have only found after the game was launched. And I'd rather have people run into problems with horribly broken keyboard controls and keyboard controls that, even though the game claims they're rebindable, are not rebindable, or cases where for some reason like 2 actions are bound to 1 button, and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather have people run into this in a demo version of a game where they don't have to pay money for it than they would run into it after they've paid for it, because that would create much more problems and is just in general like much more awful experience. Yeah, even though it wasn't like, didn't really work the way I hoped it would go, it was fine. I just had to like work through like my own frustrations, even though like in some points, like I found one feedback, I just want to mention it. Well, like someone in a video mentioned, yeah, the game feels unfinished. Yeah, well, you're playing a demo for a festival where like games that are unfinished are being shown. Sure, they are like in different states of being unfinished, but yeah, you're playing an unfinished video game. That was just like something I found like incredibly weird. But at the same time, if you look at a lot of like especially the more popular stuff during the Steam Next Fest, and it's the same with like exhibition demos, is they're like highly polished and like very often like probably much closer to release than this game was. So it creates again this perception that, oh yeah, these are like mostly finished things or like highly polished things, like, or games or projects where like more than one person works on them. Overall, in terms of like planning, I probably should have been able to, or like should have planned more than 3 to 2.5 weeks of polish and bugs fixing before the Steam Next Fest, and more like should have looked at 2 months or something like that, which wouldn't have meant that I would have like found all of the things that have popped up, but maybe like the overall degree of quality probably would have been better, but I didn't. So that's the situation I'm in. By the way, I'm also like going to keep the demo up for a while because it's actually functional now. Tutorial is still meh, but you can get through it, and that's something that's possible now. And yeah, just so that people can play it, and maybe I can get a bit more information on stuff. But yeah, I'll keep it up for now, because why not? It's there. I'm in no rush, so I can just keep it up. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about other things that I found. I actually wanted this to be short, but I'm never short, so who cares? So I want to talk a little bit about what I figured out in terms of like the controls and some of the feedback that I've gotten. And again, this isn't me going, the feedback that I've gotten is wrong. It's more like showing how I'm trying to work through the feedback that I got, and like trying to figure out how can I improve these things, and how can I change how this is perceived without having to, in some parts, fundamentally change what I want this game to be. So, and this is like the part where I say, yeah, it turns out there's a reason why Metroidvanias usually don't start you with every movement ability. This is something I've been thinking about like for a while now, there's a reason why you usually don't have every movement ability at the start of like something like a Metroidvania, because that makes teaching the game's controls and the movement system much more difficult. If you start your game with just like the basic movements, you can only build areas that are like centered around it, and as you gradually gain more abilities, you can gradually introduce more elements that teach you then, for example, if you get a double jump, you can then learn how to time your double jump correctly, and then you get a dash move, and then you can learn how to do your double jump, then chain it into a dash and do something else, and so on and so on. You can gradually ramp up the complexity, and kind of the teaching element of everything is much more like simpler. It doesn't mean, oh, it's easier to do or whatever. These things are all complex and difficult, but it makes that part and the question, how do I teach this to people, much more simpler, because at each point during this thing, or at least at the start, you have a very clear path. First you have this, then you have this, then you have this, and you can basically build these, like basically chain these things together. So that's something. Virtuous Heaven doesn't do that, and there's a reason for that, but like it doesn't do that, and I don't want it to do that, so that's a problem. Like it's very overwhelming, and then there's like the point where like, and this is like a very common criticism that was like, especially with people who played on keyboard but also played on controller, that they didn't like the way the wall jump works. So the wall jump and also the ledge grab, where you like flip yourself over a ledge, works in such a way that you have to press like a button to initiate it and to hold it. And there was a reason for it. I'll talk about it in a moment. And this was being perceived as too complicated. And this is something I realized way back in October when I started to actually, for the EGX demo that had to run on keyboard for like the first few days, I had to build keyboard controls, and I really struggled to find a setup where I thought, okay, this does not make my fingers hurt. And I was not very happy with it, but I thought, okay, put it in there, have it functional. Once you do a public demo, have rebindable controls so that people can find a comfortable setup for it. But I never really sat down and thought, okay, how do I want to set this up that it's not that weird as it is right now. And one thing I saw from the few videos or streams that I saw was that people especially struggled with the section where you had to chain your wall jump into like the upwards dash and climb a fairly long vertical section. This was meant as a way to show people you can chain moves together to basically stay in the air for as long as you want. However, it's not very well explained, and it's very long, and like frankly the degree of movements and things you have to do is just like it's too much. I didn't adjust it, which again is like a problem on my end, because that's also something I saw with the previous demo, because that was only the tutorial area and a lot of people had troubles there, but I didn't sit down and I thought, okay, what can I do about this? So yeah, a problem. And now the question is, what do you do with that? Because I've gotten that feedback, and I see this is an element that makes a lot of people basically check out of the game and what it wants to do, and that's a problem. And what do you do about that? And this is like basically where you start doing game design, right? So there are a few obvious solutions. You can make the wall jump automatic. You can do the Metroidvania thing in that you reduce the initial complexity of the movement and gradually increase it. You can also do something where you remove like moves from the game, that especially those that have like partially or like completely redundant functions. Like the game doesn't really need to have like a wall jump and this upwards uppercut dash, because both to a degree serve the same functions. You can increase your vertical, like basically your ability to traverse vertical spaces. And then you also have a double jump that also like that more like works in a horizontal way, but also like slightly increases the way you can travel upwards. However, the problem with all of these things is that they don't really work with what I want this game to be. And I want to at least show in parts what I mean by that. Again, it's a much more complicated thing. I actually want to like write a like proper like blog post about this, because I find it interesting. It's like actually personal, like for me personally interesting to like talk through this and talk through like my process like in a more detailed way, because I think it shows what like in the end you do when you design a video game. It's not about okay, I'm going to just take something from like a different game that to some degree is similar to what I'm doing and just like do it like they do. But instead it's about figuring out how you can achieve a similar goal, in that people get comfortable with what you want to do, like with your control scheme, with what you set out to do, without having to really change what makes you interested in this piece. So, for example, like I say it here, like what, like the question is, what is Witcher's Heaven then? And like one thing I figured out yesterday as I like worked myself through this was like, and this is like actually like a fairly old thought I had, is that Witcher's Heaven is an instrument. Like the control scheme is an instrument to a degree, and the way you like, and what this then is that. And what you do in this game is improvisation. Like if you were to say, you can, to a degree, you can make an analogy between like expressive like movement or action type games to instruments to a degree, because you kind of have like a set of things that you can do, and you can as a player express yourself within a certain space. Like an instrument gives you like a certain set of like notes that you can play with it. And these notes give you like a certain space for expression to a degree. You can then make another analogy, and I know I'm going way off here, but you can then look at something, if you compare like something like what I try with Witcher's Heaven to something that is like Celeste, which also has like a fairly extensive movement system, but where the challenges are much more rigid. You can think about it in such a way that like the challenges that something like Celeste gives you is much more about, okay, it wants you to play these certain notes, like you do a jump, you do a diagonal dash, then you grab onto a wall, and then you do something else that resets your dash, then you do another thing and so on, and then you get through it. And if you are not able to play these notes in like roughly the correct succession, you usually land in a stage hazard or something like that, and you have to repeat the whole section. Witcher's Heaven isn't built in such a way. It's a much more like open-ended structure, which means like the moves that you do are much more based on improvisation. You cannot really completely predict or like oversee the whole area that you have to traverse, and you have to react to what's coming towards you, which means you have to be able to like make very deliberate decisions and like also have a degree of like being comfortable with the tool set that you have. Usually you're not very comfortable like with improvisation when you're just starting to learn an instrument, because you have no idea what all of these buttons do and how you properly move like across like the whatever, the keyboard or whatever you're playing. So that is a problem. And also like for me with Witcher's Heaven is, again, I want every move to be deliberate. I want everything to be something that the players have to actively decide to do at every moment. And for example, and that's the thing, the wall jump was automatic for like quite a while. But it did not feel right when I played the game. It felt incredibly erratic, because like especially when you were close to walls, it just felt weird, and it made you insecure about how you properly move through a space, because you could not fully predict what would happen or more or less if you can't see like the whole space that you're traversing and you're very fast and have a lot of different movements, then suddenly having something that just triggers felt weird. However, once I added that button, it fell into place. Suddenly there was a reason to actually do a grab onto wall. Like the GIF here doesn't completely show that part. It's kind of like a comparison. It's something I recorded back in August. I actually wrote a fairly long thing on co-host back then, trying to explain why I changed the wall jump and how happy I was that I changed that part, which is very funny if you think about that part being the thing that like folks have like criticized like the most, aside from again the game technically not being there. So you can see it a tiny bit. The first part is like where the wall jump was like how it was previously. You grab onto a wall and then you kind of slide up and down. And the second part is like how it's working now is you jump towards a wall, you press and hold the button, you stay where you are, and then you can oversee and assess your situation and plan out your next moves. And that's what I want this to be. However, there are like things obviously that I have to change here because it's not working and people are frustrated. What I personally think what might be a problem here, like aside from like just like throwing too much complexity at people right at the start, and this is like the thing here, this is like the movement flow chart that you can hear like on the right. There's actually quite a lot of stuff that you can do, and it's very overwhelming. And I want people, again, to be able to play this, to express themselves throughout this and be able to, again, improvise. And the reason why I want this all to be is because when I playtest this, I can see how nice it actually is once you've gotten a hang of it. And I want other people to be able to do that as well. So the problem with Witcher 7 here is that moves can be changed into one another. However, right now there is absolutely no feedback which moves actually can be changed into one another or which moves reset other moves. For example, your double jump does not reset unless you touch the ground. Or it does reset if you do a dash and then like a horizontal or vertical dash like attack. That also resets your double jump, but only these things. Your dash as well does not does get reset with a double jump. However, your normal dash does not reset the double jump. You have to do an attack, and that then resets the double jump. So in order to change these things, you have to do very specific actions. However, the game never tells you about that. And that's a problem, because again, if you think about then this large vertical section, which kind of requires you to understand how you can change these things together, not like knowing what chains actually work and like how this works. This is a problem of like missing feedback, like in a very big way, and that's like something that I need to fix and that I need to address. And again, like these parts also, like if like with missing feedback. That means this is kind of like, again, if you use the instrument thing, is assume you have a piano and someone sits you in front of it and says, okay, you play something, try to figure it out, learn it. These things play notes, but about like 2/3 of the notes that you play are silent to you, and are silent to you, so you don't know if you play the wrong note. The only way for you to know if you played the wrong note is that someone else hears it and like smacks you with a broomstick or something every time you play the wrong note. But since you have no idea like why exactly it's the wrong note in that specific context or whatever, it feels arbitrary, and that's not something that you want in this thing. So, and when something feels arbitrary and you're already overwhelmed with, okay, you have to do this and that, and this is a separate button, and it's weird, and the keyboard controls are weird, and then you add this on top of that like just makes it awful. Next step, again, is the very open-ended level design, which also fuels back into it being harder to give feedback when you did something wrong. Again, if you go back to what I said about Celeste, if you do something wrong in Celeste, it's immediately clear, or like fairly quickly clear that you did something wrong. You could do something in Virtua 7, like you have a long vertical section, you start doing your upwards movement, and you could have done a wrong move, quote unquote, very early on, that like almost at the end of it would lead to you getting hit by something. And since you cannot really you don't know it like when you did that wrong move, and you have like not a clear understanding of like which things reset what things and whatever, it's first of all, it's not clear that you made something wrong, and then it's very hard for you to correct the mistake that you made once it becomes clear that you're going to make a mistake. So that's a problem. Again, that's like kind of like you're not being able to hear what you're playing fully, and you're just guessing and hoping that it works. And that's not very, very interesting. So that's all of this part. And this is what I'm trying to do, like to improve things. So if Virtua 7 is an instrument, if I want this, like the control scheme, to work like an instrument, that means it has to be much clearer what you can do at which point, and how you can chain these things together. I was actually thinking about, what if I create sound effects that work kind of like musical chords, and if you like do the right moves, like chain the right moves into one another, you're basically generating a melody. That was actually like something I've been thinking about like this morning. No idea, again, very far out and all that kind of stuff, but like trying to find something where like you can like, and also like several like chains of like communication where you can understand, okay, I'm in this state, I have these things at my disposal, so on and so forth. The next thing that is very important here, and this goes back to like again the overall idea, is like to make stages in such a way that they are more broken down into small, simpler, and deliberate challenges. Right now, a lot of the areas, especially the vertical areas, are like fairly open. And what I want to do, and again, it goes back to musical instrument, is build them in such a way that like they ideally teach you certain things. So, and not in a way that you're like limiting the movement system like from the beginning, but more these challenges teach you that you can, again, for example, use like your horizontal or like use a dash attack to reset your double jump. And you do just that for several screens in several different iterations or whatever. And you gradually then throughout the game require players to do more complicated things. Not throughout the entire stage, but like within like specific sections. I was thinking about like that these might be very good places for the extra stages where you like get new convictions. Like this might work perfectly well like for these, because these are much more contained spaces. They are much more built like classic platformer levels with very deliberate parts and all that kind of stuff. So they would work fairly well there. Again, there's a problem of like getting players to that point, but yeah. So that's all that stuff. But also with that being said, I actually found a way to make the wall jump maybe not a bit less complex, but a bit less frustrating to do. And again, I have to experiment with that. And overall, I have to find ways to do more deliberate playtests more often. I have no idea how I'm supposed to be able to do that, because again, I don't have resources. I cannot pay people. So going around and saying, yeah, okay, can you please do QA for me is a bit rough. So I have to find a way where this is like where I can do it in some way, and even if it's at like a very small scale. Obviously there's like stuff like the Steam playtesting thing that they set up, but I tried to do this with GB Roba in 2021, and what I found is that nobody really gives you feedback there. So I like, and again, it felt much more like a potential like thing to promote your game than it is about like actually trying to get the information that you want. And this also like feeds back into how much, like, what are player expectations in that regard as well. So that's all a bit complicated, and like there's stuff that I need to figure out. But overall, what I at this point where I come around on is, I actually was able to figure out how I want this to how I want to teach this thing. Doesn't mean that it will work again, but I have a much better idea of, instead of just like, yeah, I guess you build something in that way and like say, yeah, okay, these are the controls, and then, yeah, well, whatever. That's not really good teaching. And again, that's on me. Like, it's not that I'm sitting here, and that was like a very big problem for me throughout the week, like to not get overly defensive against this, like against some of the criticism, and especially against some of the suggestions that people made, because they don't know what I'm trying to make. And it's very obvious that, like, for example, when someone sees something, oh, the controls of the wall jump are different than what I'm used to, so the obvious solution is to suggest to make the controls in such a way that I'm used to them, which is a solution, but maybe not really one that applies to this situation. And I had to be like, I had to be very careful to not turn into the kind of person that just say, oh, you just don't understand my vision, which is like, sure, I have an idea here, but also like, obviously there's something wrong here. So, and both of these things can be true. I can have a vision, and the suggestions that people make might not fit it, but also what they describe is an obvious problem that I need to fix. And how can I merge these things? How can I find a common through line here? And the other part is, a problem is being described. However, the underlying reason for the existence of that problem might not be the one that the people who's describing the problem thinks that it is. So again, you have to like figure this stuff out, but at the same time, and this sounds like very, very silly to a degree, this is game design. This is what you do when you make a video game. You have an idea that you want to express, you build the thing, and you try to communicate that idea and try to communicate that thing that you want to make, and you run into problems. Most likely, you generally run into problems about, okay, how do I want to communicate this idea to people? And I cannot, like, I don't have like a thing where I'm standing behind everyone and say, yeah, no, you can do this, like, try it a few times. And again, it's like you're trying to teach someone how to play an instrument without a teacher being standing behind them and telling them, yeah, you can do this. Like, repeat this sequence of notes a few times, and then you're more comfortable. You don't have that in a video game. So you have to find different ways how to build this in such a way that this hopefully happens more organically. But yeah, and in the end of the day, I'm fairly certain that like a fairly large portion of people would still bounce off of this, because it does something in a slightly, like, in a way that they might not be used to, and that's fine. What I'm not fine with is when people are not, as I said at the beginning, are not able to even understand what this game is trying to do. If they bounce off of after that, okay, but not after 5 minutes. I'd rather them like at least get a little bit further into it before they realize it's not for them. That would be great. And especially not because they felt, okay, if I do this on a keyboard, my fingers will break, because that's not fun. So again, there's stuff that I need to adjust. There's stuff that I need to figure out. And I will find some kind of solution, and then we'll have to see if that one works. Can't do it in another Steam Next Fest, because that was my one thing, the one Steam Next Fest that I was able to do and allowed to do. But I'll find other ways somehow. Anyway, overall, I'm very grateful for anyone who has played the game and put the game on their wish list and all that kind of stuff. It's nice to see. And I'm as rough as it was, I'm fairly grateful, like, for the feedback that I got, because there was a lot of stuff in there that now has helped me figure some things out. Don't be angry at me if I may not do the thing that you want me to do with this, because that's how it goes. But I take the stuff that I see serious, and I want to do it better. And it will be better. I'm fairly certain of that. It will just take some time. Like, again, this game, like, and I need to change it on Steam, but this game won't be out this year. Definitely not. Like, most likely late next year, probably. Because this will take a while. This is all complicated. And it's also, like, something I realized this week is, this is too large for one person, but here I am making it, and I have to see what I can do with this. And yeah, like, I will try to get more resources for this project in some way. I don't know if I'll get it, especially the way the demo is set up right now. I'm gonna try and see what I can do. But anyway, as always, you can follow @Mokograd on Twitter for more updates, as long as Twitter is still around. Who knows? I still have an email newsletter that I want to revive. You can subscribe to it at tinyletter.com/Mokograd. There will be one at some point. It's something I want to do. I just keep forgetting about it. You can subscribe to, like, the YouTube channel that this video is hosted on. Wishlist Witcher 7 on Steam. You just heard me talk for, like, almost 45 minutes about, like, how I want to improve this and all that kind of stuff. So you know that, like, it's the good game design thing. I don't know. No, but yeah, feel free to wishlist it. That would be cool. Again, you get an email once the game's done. So hooray. Anyway, I don't know. I hope you have a nice week. And I'll see you around, probably around March, when I do the proper video for this month. I don't know. Have a nice one. Goodbye.